The guest is Dr. Charles Kimbrough, a longtime NAACP activist, and the topic is the Korean War and civil rights. And of course, Dr. Kimbrough, over these last few minutes that we have here, give us some idea in terms of what it was like to be a part of the military when you went in. Of course, you came out and was able to take advantage of the GI Bill. But what was it like when you first went into the military, and talk about separation and some of the things associated with that?
Well, I was in the Army for a period of 6 years. And when I went in, you know, we were completely separated. We were just part of the fabric of the United States, of course. That was in 1947 that I went in. And then, of course, President Truman, with his executive order, desegregated armed services. And, of course, it was at a snail pace, pretty much like the school system was here in Nashville and surrounding area. You know, the order comes down in 54, but you wound up integrated in the first grade in 57. So the Army was no different in that sense. Usually, you separated in the barracks, separated in the wherever you were serving, you were segregated. One of the things that happened is you could have a black first sergeant. He's going to do the drilling and the direct orders, and then the white lieutenant. If you had a black lieutenant, it'd usually be a second lieutenant and a white first lieutenant. But so it's always that pecking order from the top down. Then, of course, my second tour saw some differences, many more differences, in that you started to have, you'd have blacks and whites eating in the mess hall together, and, but still going back to their, for the most part, their separate units.
Okay.
Of course, eventually, I saw greater aspects of desegregation in that I was at Fort Benning, Georgia at one point in time. That was still during the Korean War, but having gotten wounded and came back stateside, where as a black person, I was trained by a white sergeant for be over the orthopedic ward, and then I got in a position to do that myself. But racism being what it was, the person, a captain, wanted me to train a white individual to take my job. So rather than do that, of course, I went back and spent, I didn't have to go back, having been wounded, to go back overseas, but I elected to go back. And because you didn't, I guess that's why I've tried to stand up a little straighter to people now, because in the military, you know, you can get court-martialed for doing some of the things that, by objecting to certain orders, however ridiculous they might be. But that was a part of the military. And of course, we did see, and it's commonplace now, but whites and blacks start playing basketball together, boxing matches, you know, all that kind of thing was integrated.
And so it was very, very slow coming around in terms of just bringing even the Army together. And all this time, for the most part, society is still as segregated outside of the military, is still much more segregated than the military.
Well, that is true. You can have a little more control, apparently. See, for instance, you know, President Truman, his desegregation order was in 1948. We don't get the Supreme Court order to desegregate public schools until 1954. And then they said, with all deliberate speed, which meant you it gave that grade a year, so to speak, as well as certain years of just outright resistance. You didn't have that kind of thing in the military. Although you had many aspects of segregation still existing after the order.
Now you were wounded in the war itself, were you not? Well, now how did we fight as separate units? How did that?
Well, you fought as separate units. I was in the 24th Infantry Regiment, and of course the 25th Infantry Regiment is over on one flank, and the 24th is on another flank. So the system is so entrenched until it takes a while to, even when you conscientiously try to desegregate. It's so entrenched until I guess it comes down so that you have to almost have a study of the system to desegregate. But eventually that came to pass. We used to walk, to show you how we were segregated, we would be walking our post. The white soldiers riding in a Jeep over here on their post, you see. And we'd come up and meet at given points and discuss issues with one another. And then you go back
walking, and they'd go back to riding.
Yeah. So that's a part of the system. But I did start working in the dispensaries and the hospitals where segregation was not an issue. But I think it depended pretty much on a person being a lieutenant or captain and his particular position as to how he wanted to do things. If he had the will, he found a way to carry out the order of desegregation.
Very good. And of course, looking back over all of these experiences, what are some of the things that you can say to many of the young people today? This is one of the things that we often raise with all of our guests, because I think that in too many instances we find that so many of our young people are not focused in reference to some of the things that you were concerned about. They don't have any real direction in life. What could you say to them this morning, next few minutes that we have?
Well, we have some really enemies to progress, such as television, as it's a real good force in our lives, but it can take up too much of your time. Learn to turn the TV off. First of all, if you're still there with mom and papa, mother and father, if you please, your job, if you're in the school age, is to get your lesson. Get your lesson, take advantage of those provisions that are being made for you. Since that's your job to get your lesson, be sure you come up with a good report card. Appreciate your mother and your father for the persons that they are. They're providing for you. Don't take advantage of their absence while they're trying to make a living, and you get into something that you should be getting into at home, because you pay now or later. Too many of our young black men are paying in the prison system, but not following directions, parental guidance. So there's just not too many shortcuts, and you don't have as much time as we had at that time to pick up on issues. It's just the age of technology. It's not horse and buggy days any longer. You got to really stay on cue and know where you are going in order to get there. But keep in mind that wherever you're going, you're closer to it than you think. If it's in the wrong direction, you're near. And if it's in the right direction, you can thank God and stay on the right in the right direction.
Say something over the last 50, 40 seconds that we have about voting. Should they participate in
voting? You know, there is a reason that people don't want you to vote. And if you think about Tuskegee, for instance, where in Macon County you had a 28-sided county in and around the houses and cutting out black people to keep them off the voting rolls. then you know that voting is important.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Kimbrough, we have to end it here, and let me simply thank you for the excellent information that you've given us and the inspiration in a real sense that you've given us. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.